Okay, humans, this time we're going to be talking about the path visualizations options in Maya and how we can achieve the same thing in two different ways. We're also going to make two animations, two separate animations that do or look similarly and are achieved in two completely different ways. All right. So without further ado, let's begin. I've created this simple object over here and I've made it pink so that it's easier to see. Perhaps I should scale it up a little bit as well so that it's more visible here in the general view. So this is a boomerang, okay? A very simple object, nothing fancy about it. What I want to do now is animate it so that it basically behaves like a boomerang. So let's just go ahead right into it. For this I'm going to use, I will use 100 frames, and I'm going to keep my range of 25 so that I have an easier understanding of what I'm doing. So first and foremost, let's go ahead and move this. By the way, I'm going to be using the more appropriate keys over here. So I'm going to be using the translates, the rotates, and the scales instead of the full key set because I need this. It's going to speed up my workflow significantly, and I'll show you why. So let's go ahead and move this over to, let's say, let's just zero this out, and let's say -30. This is going to be my first frame, and I'm going to basically set the transform of this object on the first frame. Frame 50 is when we want to have our object to be the furthest away from the thrown target, so it will be something like over here. Let's just say that it's going to be 0, and we're going to put this at 80. No, this has to be 0, my bad. This has to be 80. Okay, so this is our furthest point, and I'm going to create a, well, first I need to create a key, and then I'm going to convert it into a breakdown. The reason being is that I want this to be the I want this this point to be the furthest my object is from the, let me just turn off ghosting on. I forgot to, I was playing around with this thing. I'll show you what ghosting is later. But I want this to be the furthest my object ever is, okay? And then obviously at frame 100, I want it to be at, what was frame 1? I believe it was -30, so I want it to be at 30. So let's just say at frame 100, I want it to be at 30. Well, 0 and 30. And I'm gonna basically key that in. So as it is right now, we have a let me just max out the range here. If it would be very nice if I could max out the range, please. So right now what we've got is something very simple, right? And I removed the oscillation, by the way, because it was a pain in the ass to work with this if it was going back and forth. So this is our boomerang right now. Nothing fancy, nothing impressive. Obviously, we could add a couple of keyframes here. So at frame 25, maybe I could, I don't know, move it a little bit out. So I'd say this would be my value, and I'm going to copy the Y here, and then I'm going to go to frame 75, and I'm going to put this over here without the minus, and I'm going to put a keyframe here as well. So now I have a more complete trajectory, something like a parabola. However, you'll notice that my boomerang does not really look anything like a boomerang. It doesn't spin, first of all, and second of all, it has a constant speed, which is a problem. Now, obviously, there are editors that are, can do this for you, but there's a really simple tool that allows you to modify these things. But before we actually do this, I think it'd be appropriate that we specify our rotation, because that's what we want. And notice that I started animating with my scale being set to 3.9, which is never good. You always want to zero out your objects before you start animating. So in my case, this is a mistake, because if I play around with the scale, if I animate the scale, I'd have to return it back to 3.9 instead of having it zeroed in. And obviously, I think if I zero this thing now, nothing's going to happen because I don't have it keyed in. Can I zero this? Let me just see here. No, I cannot, because it's already keyed in on the translate. A pity. Anyway, it doesn't matter for this because it's not a big deal. But what we're going to do now is we're going to rotate this object 10 times over the course of its flight. right? So one rotation is 360 degrees. And in our case, we're going to be rotating across the z-axis. So I'm going to say 10 rotations. That's a little bit too many. It's 100 rotations. I'm going to put it 3600 over here. And I'm going to say Shift E. And this means that ideally though, I really don't need to key these zeros. Obviously, it'd be better if I just go ahead and right click and key selected, which is a much more clean approach, much cleaner approach to what we're doing right now. However, this isn't really going to work right now because we don't have any other keys for the rotation as it is. Notice it's still going to stay the same. That is because we need to set the keyframe of 0 of the rotation over here. And now if we play our animation, there should be something of a, like it should be something that resembles a boomerang, even though, you know, this doesn't really look like someone threw a boomerang out. Okay, so now you might say, well, listen, how are we going to modify this so that it looks a little bit better? Well, first let's take a look at what we've got in our possession. We've got the Visualize toolkit here. And by the way, I'm not going to touch up on the snapshot bit because I'm really not a fan of this. I don't really know why it exists. But you can think of it as a lofting ability. You can loft things via your time slider. In other words, if you create, let's say, okay, I'm going a little bit off topic here, but let's just create a simple primitive. And I've got this circle, right? So imagine that you got a circle and you say, well, on the first frame, it's going to have this position in this scale, right? And then on the second frame, on the next frame, let's say frame number 50, it's going to be slightly bigger and going to have a different position. So you're going to have these two different things. Instead of framing them, I'm just going to go ahead and say that this is one, like so. So this is your starting point. This is your end point. And obviously between the two, if you animate it, right, the time slider is going to interpolate its position and its scale, just like an animation would. And after that, you could take a snapshot of it and either sweep around it, or basically sweep and connect the objects, or use a snapshot, and for every frame of this object, you would have another object. I really don't know when you would use that, especially for making stuff for games, maybe in some complicated fancy level design, but the ability to duplicate stuff with its transform by duplicating it, Control D and moving it out, and then Shift D, like this is also, and then you can obviously scale it up and down, and then you can keep Shift D. It's going to even control your scale, so you could easily loft the same type of deal without using this animation bit. Maybe it's a legacy system, I don't know what it's for, but I guess if you're an animator big time and you get used to it, maybe modeling with this toolkit is going to be easier. That being said, then out of the way, let's talk about ghosting. Ghosting is something really cool for me. I really like the way it looks like. It makes it look very fancy, but in reality it's a very simple thing. Basically draws your object forward and backwards a couple of frames. Now, these global preferences over here are available in the Windows settings, obviously preferences, and the display of animation. I really don't know why this is grayed out really for me. Maybe you got to do something fancy. I'm not too sure when it comes to these things. But ideally, even if you don't want your globals here, you can just go ahead and use custom keyframes, key steps, whatever. But the globals are essentially that you're going to have a drawing 3 frames before, 3 frames after, and it's going to be drawn every frame. Obviously, the frame range is how far, for how long this will be drawn into. So if we go ahead and say from 0 to 50, we're going to see the ghosting only from 0 to 50, even though our animation runs for 100. This might sound a little bit confusing, so I'm just going to ghost this thing. And notice right now that as my animation goes forward, you see the keys in front of it. Now, obviously, this is a little bit confusing because we see too many keys. They're too close together. That's why when you're ghosting stuff, you can say custom frame steps. You can say, well, I want to have every 5 frames one ghost. This way, you're going to have a ghost every 5 frames. And this is a much easier now, so you can see what exactly we're doing. If we start rotating things, that if I reset the keyframe here, that's going to affect the rest of the motion. Obviously, you don't need the in and out of it, because you could say, well, maybe I just want the front ones or the back ones. Maybe you want more frames on the front, more frames on the back. It's very nice. But the real power of this menu comes from the, I'm going to ghost this, comes from the, oh yeah, by the way, before we do this thing, I just want to talk about the turntable. Basically, this is going to create a camera that's going to be rotating 160 degrees around your object, like so. So it will be rotating around, and this is usually done so that you can have something like, like in one of them, expose, I'd say, when you have an object in the middle and there's a camera rotating around it all the time. That's basically what it is, a turntable. It's done so that you can see how lights are going to affect your objects and how it's probably going to be rendered. But since we're not going to be doing any of that, we're not going to be using lights or any scene setups, we're not going to be rendering any movies in Maya. We really don't care about this. At least I don't care about this. If you want to play around with it, be my guest. I find it useless, and I don't spend much time on it. Anyway, the motion trail bit is really awesome. Let's go ahead and open the menus here, the options, and see what the whole story is. Now you're going to notice that you've got pretty much the same options as the ghosting, right? You've got the time range, as in you're going to have, obviously you're going to have a trail of the motion of the object. I mean, I hope I'm not spoiling this for you. I'm just going to create this, by the way, because all these settings are fine with me. And if you understood what I was talking about during the ghosting period, this is exactly the same thing. Okay, only applies to the motion path, not to the object. So let's just create a motion trail, and you'll quickly see what I mean. So this is my little path over here. Everything that I do, and notice, by the way, that my breakpoint is unavailable, like it's green right now, even on the motion path. And as my object covers the trajectory that it's passing, the path is going to change color. Obviously, you can specify, different things. You could increase the thickness, for example, of the path. If we go ahead and visualize again, and you will see that you can have a different trail thickness over here, which is depending what you want. I believe you can have the start and end time here as well. You can basically edit everything from the inputs, right? The increments are interesting as well, because they talk about, like, depending on how many frames you've got, right, and how far in your motion trail is. But the cool thing about this trail is that you can obviously modify the key. So if I go ahead and grab this key, the only downside to it is that as of yet, symmetry doesn't work with this. So if you decide to grab, like, let's say, activate the symmetry bit, I don't think it's gonna create a symmetrical thing. Yeah. So unfortunately, symmetry doesn't work here. But as you grab these, you can move them around. Notice that the breakpoint you cannot move. The breakpoint is there forever. You can move the start and the end points. Let's say maybe this should be over here. And if you don't have enough keys, you could always create some, right? So let's say I'm gonna right click over the trail, and I'm gonna say, first of all, let's just see the frames. So we've got this is frame 25, frame 75, 100, and frame 50. Now I think I cannot transform this while the motion trail is available, and I can't convert this back to a regular key. Yes, I can't for some reason. So that's unfortunate. So we're going to skip that for now. We can always talk about the tangents bit, but I'm going to show this to you visually, and then I'm going to modify them here. I believe they're going to be updated on time. So by the way, this trail is here in the outliner. It is an object of its own. So you can, if you want to delete it, you just delete it from the outliner, right? What else do we have here now? We've got all the show frames, which is I just turned it on. You got the trail thickness, obviously, how thick the trail is. You don't want to go nuts on that. If I could maybe grab this, as you can see, when you can go really high, up to 20. So this is a ridiculously big trail. So maybe something like 2 or 3. Like in my case, 3 is probably going to be better, or 2. There we go. I've got a motion trail set up. The next, you've got the fade in out frames. We're not going to have any because we don't want to be fading in and out of anything. But this is basically how much of the trail will be shown as you move the object, right? And the next one, you got the keyframe size. How big are your keyframes? You obviously don't want them to be this big, unless for some reason you do. But basically everything is essentially available to you. The pre and post frame is pretty cool because this allows you to see, basically shows you how much of the path is going to be available to you. So notice how you've got the post frame only, which means that the path is going to remain the same. But this is usually useful when you've got a lot of geometry and this stuff gets in your way, but you should probably keep it to 0 because you don't want it. The pin bit is also pretty cool because if I deselect the object, notice that it still stays here. Otherwise, I have to, if I select it and I remove the pin, I'm going to have to go into the outliner and grab my motion handle, motion trail handle, in case that I lose it. Obviously, presuming that I have so many objects in the scene that it's, you know, impossible to have it there. Another thing, by the way, these things are basic objects, so you can add them to selections, etc. Look, anything that you can think of is here, all right? So it's not a big deal, and I believe you can actually move it if you enable the transform bit here. But the most important thing that I like about this is the ability to modify the animation on the fly. Now, obviously, there's an actual editor for this stuff, but it is very easy to modify your animation as you're working. It's not as precise, obviously, but it does a really good job. So let's go ahead and take a look at what I'm talking about here. First, let's go and take a look at our timing beads. The timing beads are interesting because in this case, maybe I should have selected a frame and then go into timing beads. Notice that I have the timing beads here, and what they do is if I go ahead and grab these and move them up and down, this will basically modify the speed at which my object will be animated. So the closer these beads are, the faster the object will be moving. If I grab them, right, I'm dragging them really close, so the object will be accelerating very fast. If we go ahead and play this now, you'll see what's going to happen is this will accelerate and then it's going to slow down. So it's going to accelerate over here rapidly according to the beads, the in and out bit. Look, it depends if you like using this. Obviously, you get to you get a lot of control this way. Not a big fan. I'm not a big fan of the beads really because it's just like a guideline. You can't really get too good of a grip of what you're doing. But obviously you have the in and the out bit. So if I go ahead and let's say I don't want the beads out, I want the beads in. Beads, 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 beads. I want the beads in, and I want this to be speeding up as it's being thrown, and then slow down. If I grab, this is very hard to grab, by the way, for some reason. So I want it to be slow at the end, and then I want it to be speeding up as it goes out. And obviously, I need to turn in the other ones as well, so that as it speeds out, it's gonna gain some momentum, and it's gonna be very slow over here at the bottom. So I'm gonna speed it up here even a little bit more, and go ahead and grab the other beads in again and speed it up over here as well, something like this. So you get the idea, right? If I play this now, this should be speeding up, and then obviously this would be my apex, obviously, because this would be slowing down. Imagine that this is at the break point. It's not at the break point because I cannot modify it as it is right now because it's locked in. Okay, that's unfortunate, but such is life. The next thing you've got is the ability to insert other. Oh, there we can convert this to a breakdown. I wonder if we can convert this to a regular key from here. No, it's a real pity. What if I convert this to a breakdown now? What's going to happen? Can I convert it back? No, I can't. Okay, so the funny thing is you cannot convert this to a regular key, but you can convert a regular key to a breakdown. Modify keys. Well, anyway, once you go to modify keys, you have several options. You can shift click on a key to delete it, which is an issue, but then again, this is going to get rid of your problem with a particular break key that you cannot remove. But the thing is, once you click, I'm just going to go back here. Once you click somewhere, let's say, well, obviously you can drag something, but it's going to go into the intersect point. So let's say I want a frame over here, and there you go. You've got a frame at 24. Now you might be thinking, well, this doesn't really help me much because I can't really figure out where I'm putting it. That's true, but you can still move it around over here, right? So you can shift select it and move it to frame 25. Frame 25, and this will move our whole trail over here. The problem is that right now our breaking point is at frame 50. So I'm going to shift click this and move it over here. I keep putting these things. Let me just delete this thing. Another option I have, by the way, instead of putting keys, I could also with shift clicking delete them. I could also drag them, right? So I can shift middle mouse button here, and I can drag them along, and you will see that I'm gaining frames or I'm moving this. So it's this is a very sensitive thing for some reason. Like I can't really get it right. It starts to work whenever it feels like it. So, you know, not a very good tool, I suppose, the way it works. But you can definitely modify where this frame is on its own. Notice that I've just moved a whole bunch of frames. So this would definitely change the speed at which the animation is playing. It's going to be very slow, and then it's going to speed up until the end because I have so very few frames between these two objects. However, notice that the speed between these two is always the same because this is a breakpoint, remember. No matter how far away I push this, this is also always going to be the same speed between these two. Okay, so I can grab this again and basically go into edit motion keys and keep playing around with this. Maybe I can get a better view, a better result if I play with the beads. But there's also another tool that I have available to me, and these are the tangents. These tangents are really interesting to use because they can modify easily how your path looks like. So you can grab a tangent and you can move it around, and this will transform the path according to this tangent. There's different types of tangents, as you might expect, such as you could say, well, let's go ahead and show the intangents as well. So now we've got the two tangents over here. The question is, can you break them? Well, currently no. But because we're on frame 20 whatever, if you right click over here, you can select which tangent you want, and you can say maybe I want a, I don't know, a spline tangent, or no, not a spline one. Let's say a stepped tangent or whatever. So if I go ahead and select this tangent now, it should have been updated, and I should be able to change this. No, I cannot change this, unfortunately. What about flat? No, this doesn't really happen here. That's a pity. That's a pity. Oh well, at least you've got this bit. Obviously, you can break these tangents off in the more advanced editors, but this is a quick enough way to modify your path. For some reason, I'm pretty sure there was a way to move this whole thing. Oh, there we go. I just broke them. Okay, I just broke them. So with middle mouse button, I believe you have to play around with the middle mouse button on this over here. So if I select this, yes, I believe I can break them off. No? No? I thought I just did that. If I select both of them, move them out. Yeah, Maya's starting to get seizures, so this doesn't really work out for me. But obviously this allows you a great deal of flexibility and such that you can actually not work in 3D, so it's not only a 2D representation. This is where the real power of this tool comes, by the way, because in 2D you'd probably be better off using the actual editor, which we're going to talk about later. But if this was a fish or some kind of a complex object like a rocket or whatever, this would really help you out because you can completely have full control over your trajectory here and the speed at which the animation plays and everything else. So this is really a very powerful way of doing things, okay? So I recommend just play around with this for now, but I'm going to delete it and I'm going to go back into my graph editor over here. I'm going to delete every single key that I have on this thing. What did I just do? No. This is not what you want. Shut up. I just play blasted this. Sorry, my bad. This basically creates a movie for this, all right? You don't want to do that. At least in my case, I don't want to do that. So let's just delete these keys. Delete this key. Come on, delete this and delete this. All right. Now, since we're already at the zeroed in position, let me just zero this out. And this. And I'm going to go ahead and freeze its transform as well because I don't want to have this whole scale issue again. Another way to achieve the same result, or at least a similar result, is already to know your path. So if I go ahead, I have finally set up a hotkey for this into my edit point tool, and I create a simple curve. Let's go from the top over here. I'm going to create a simple curve, and it's going to be, look, it's not going to be anything fancy. It's just going to be something like this, right? So this is definitely not a Let me go into edit points and just move some of them around so that we get a little bit of a better. I like to work with edit points. I'm not a big fan of CVs for some reason, but you know, to each his own. Obviously, it depends on how you edit this, but then again, you got the soft select bit, so you could select bit or smaller, right, and move it more appropriately. In my case, I'd be better off if I selected the curve points. Where are my curve points? Sorry, control vertices. Curve points are different if I want to insert a knot or something. So there we go. I've got some kind of some sort of a path over here, right? Something that looks like a circular thing. So there's my something like this, I suppose. I don't know. Like this looks sort of okay. So this is my boomerang path. Maybe I should go ahead and grab my edit points and just go to a curve point and really I can't insert a knot. There we go, insert a knot. So now I should have it. There we go. Insert knot, please. So if I go now into my edit points and I grab the, I inserted 2 knots. Okay, my bad. So grab them over here and just move this a little bit further away. Maybe with the soft thing. There we go. This is going to be something, sort of something. Like this is going to be my trajectory. Okay, so now that I have my little path done, egg-shaped path done, I can actually say that this object, I can tell Maya to conform this object to this path. So what I'm going to do is select the object, select the path, and go into my constraint menu. And this is why I didn't talk about this when we were talking about constraints, because this is more of an animation bit. And I'm going to say attach to motion path. But before we do that, we want to go through some of the options. Now we've got a very similar setup here. You can see we got the time slider, the start or the start and end, how far in it goes. And the front axis of the object in this situation is X, I believe. Yes, so we've got the x-axis being the front, but because we've changed our up vector to be z, so you can always say that the up axis is actually z in this situation for our object because it goes up, right? The y is pointing that way. This is not for object. This is not the axis for object. Okay. Same thing for the world type. You want to use the scene up maybe or the normal, whatever way you want to go. But basically, your world up vector is over here. Okay. Then you got the banks and all that jazz, but it's going to be available to you on the side. And we can click attach, and boom, we've got our little object. So if I go ahead right now and I try to move it, notice the connection type. This is yellow. This is much like a driven key, right? So this is not really. This cannot be keyed. If I go ahead and move this and I just key this in, let's say I try to press to do it with W, the moment I do this, it's going to turn green, but that doesn't mean that I have control of this stuff. Because if I go ahead and go into my motion path, this U value is the stuff that's tied to the object here. So that's the thing you can see over here from start to finish, and it goes from 0 to 1. And that is the stuff that actually controls it. Now, because I've created these 2 keys, for some reason I actually registered them in my situation. In my case, it never really worked out. So I'm going to delete these keys, this particular key. I didn't know you could actually do that. There we go. So now the motion path is the only thing that controls my object. And as you can see, it's flying perfectly along the line. It's not rotating though. The reason being that even if I rotate this, by the way, right now, if I go ahead and move this, it's going to snap back. It's much like a driven key. Now, I'm not too sure why I was able to key the rotation of the object. So if I go ahead and, let's say, over here, let's grab the motion path and go into our U value and put it at 0.5, meaning that it would be, actually, let's put it at 1. So at the end of my thingy here, I want it to have rotated 360 degrees across the z-axis. Notice, by the way, that the rotation is being calculated on its own. So it would be a really bad idea if I decided to rotate this by hand. Let's go and say, oh, well, I want this to be at 360, and I'm going to say Shift E. Well, Shift E. Now I have this thing keyed in. So what's going to happen now if I grab this object and I go over its keyframes? Well, nothing's going to happen because there's nothing to drive the object. Now I could say, all right, so it's going to have a 0 rotation here as well, right? And I'm going to shift E that too, and then by the end of, oh, I forgot to go to frame 100 obviously, and I need to put this at 360. Shift E. Now, do you think this is going to rotate? Yes, it will. Wow, I'm surprised. I never actually knew that you could do that, because in general, these options to you are available to you over here in the front twist. I'm just going to delete these keys to show you another way to do this. Delete, and of course, delete. So now it's going to be driven only by the path. Notice here that you've got three things, like you got the front twist, the up twist, and the side twist. So these twists are available to you, so that you can say something like, imagine if this was a plane, right? And it went, let's say y value of or u value or whatever of 0.1. Over here you want it to be banking a little bit, right? So you can twist it so that it's like flying along the path. And obviously you could say, well, this is frame number 25, so you can key this in and say, right, instead of keying my rotation over here, I can key, maybe 25 is a little bit too far, over here. Then I'm going to key this twist over here. I'm going to say key selected. Over here at the bottom, it's going to be 0, obviously. And then I'm going to key this again. So over here, this is taking a turn right now. Notice that it's taking its turn. Here it has to straighten out. So over here, it's going to be a twist of 0 again. Right, and I'm going to set this key. Right, so for now it's banking along just fine. There you go. It's turning over here, 0. Then it's starting to bank, going over here a little bit. Now here it has to start a really sharp bank, so it has to probably sort of twist. You can obviously use the others as well. Like this is your sideways, and this is your like left and down. Like obviously you can achieve many different things with this. But it's very difficult to achieve a rotation, so I'd say you'd probably be using the rotate keys over here in order to create this kind of rotation. But it is entirely possible, let's say in this situation, that if I go ahead and say, all right, so I'm not going to go there and do the banking bit all the way to the end. But by the way, notice that you've got these little bits over here that if you go into your outputs and motion path, you can actually see what your positions are. So let's say over here our outputs are 0, and the shapes bit, if I go ahead and move, would be nice. U value. I have a very sensitive middle mouse button, or for some reason I can barely move this thing. There we go. So you can have all these options. These are all of these are available to you. Obviously, you have more of a control here in the attribute editor, because you can control what the the orientations of the marker is. So that's basically what you've got, and especially again the U value here, you can control the axis, what's the up and down vector. But let's say you want to go all the way to the end, and you want this to be rotating. So in this case, you'd have to have a U value. Sorry, let's go into the channel box here. You'd have to have a front twist value of, let's say you want this to be rotating like a lot. You want this to be rotating. Again, let's go with 10 rotations along the path, and I'm going to key this in. So this is going to start all the way from the beginning, and this should be moving like a bullet. As you can see, it's rotating in a different way right now. This is now obviously it is not a boomerang, but it is perfectly achievable if over here the frame 100 you had it, instead of it being an up twist, you have it as 0. And you use a side twist like this. So this would be 360. You're going to set this key. You're going to delete this key. Delete selected. And this way, if you play this, you're going to still have this rotation. If I actually keyed it in, did I key it in? I believe I did not. Oh yeah, I didn't, because I don't have a 0 of this. So it's 360 from here, and we're going to be having it at 0 at the beginning. Key selected, and I really need to put a shortcut for key selected, maybe Shift S or something, because if you select it, it'd be nice. Yeah, I should probably do that later down the line. So now that I have this keyed in, I should have the almost identical result. Obviously, with the speed up and the speed down here, you can use the time, I believe, in the attribute editor. So if you select a particular handle over here and you go into the, you should have the attribute editor over here. You have a time somewhere there. Used to be a, oh, there you can actually bank. There you go. You can even have the banks over here, which is nice. I believe there was a time setup over here. I just don't remember where it was. Oh, there we go. There's your time. So this basically says how long this is going to take you to do this. So the higher this number is, obviously, basically the further away this is going to be in terms of frames. Okay. So it gives you a very granular control, and both of these things give you the same result, right? If you bake out your animation and you say, well, okay, what have I done? What do I have at the end of the day? Perhaps I should not have deleted, by the way, the other one in order to use it. Okay, I've made up my mind. This is just an example. We're not going to use this later. We're going to use just the one, but at least I wanted to show you different ways to achieve a similar thing. So I'm just going to stop and I'm going to delete this. I'll delete this, and I'm gonna basically go ahead and zero this out. And as you can see, it's pretty much the same object, nothing new, no deformities, nothing, and the frames, there's no keyframes as well. I'm gonna go back into my 230 frames or something like that, and I'm gonna save. And I'll see you guys next time when we're gonna talk about the graph editor, the time editor, all these funky editors. I'm going to keep this object just in case we need to animate something and then use the curves as an example, because that's the main reason I was doing this video, by the way. But as it is right now, I think you've seen more than you need. Obviously, some of these other options, like the flow path object, creates simply a deformer around the object. So if it was something like a, I don't know, like a fish in a pipe or something, you could deform something around it. And the set motion path key does exactly that. Okay. You basically set the key on the motion path. Okay. All right, guys. I'll see you next time. Play around with these options. Try to make something very simple. As you can see, even with something as basic as a boomerang or like a triangle shape or whatever, you can have a lot of flexibility in what you want it to do, how you want it to move, and what kind of controls are available to you. And I'm sure I've missed something. Obviously, I'm not a pro animator. But this should be enough to get you started playing with some of these more advanced tools. In other words, not just making things move from left to right, but actually controlling the timing, the speed of your moves, the actual trajectory of your moves, and having more, a better understanding of how things are supposed to be, and just be happy and satisfied with your work, and doesn't look completely lame. Like if you say set one key over here, and then we go over here and set this over here like that, and then we just play it. Oh, there we go. Look at my animating skills, right? I mean, this isn't very impressive at all. But we're going to talk about this later, about the graph editor. So I'll see you guys next time, and yeah, enjoy. Play around. Bye-bye.